$45 billion. I want you to just sit with that number for a second. $45 billion.
It's a staggering figure.
It is. It's a number so big it stops feeling like money and, it starts feeling like an abstraction. But it wasn't abstract. It was real value.
Very real.
It was college funds. It was retirement accounts. It was the treasury of entire companies. And in May of 2022, it didn't just dip. It didn't have a bad week. It evaporated.
It's arguably one of the most violent destructions of wealth in the history of financial markets. And I don't say that to be hyperbolic.
Yeah, I don't think you are.
If you look at the speed of it, we're talking about a top 10 global crypto asset effectively going to zero. Not in a month, not in a year, but in the span of about 72 hours.
And the craziest part isn't even the speed. It's what this thing was supposed to be. I mean, we aren't talking about some speculative meme coin with a dog on it that everyone knew was a gamble.
Right.
We are talking about stablecoins. The one thing in this entire wild west of crypto that was promised, literally engineered, to stay boring, to stay at exactly $1.
That's the promise, isn't it? The promise was stability. The reality was a death spiral. And that's the tragedy of it. It preyed on people's search for safety.
We are, of course, talking about the collapse of Terra and its token, Luna. And looking back at it now, from our vantage point here in 2026, the dust has finally settled. We have the court verdicts, we have the forensic accounting, and we have, I think, the full picture of what happened.
We do.
But even knowing how it ends, the story is absolutely wild. It's got a founder on the run with fake passports, it's got secret bailouts from high-frequency traders, and it has a mechanism that, when you really look at it, makes you wonder how anyone thought it would work in the first place.
It's a case study in hubris. It's a story about what happens when you try to reinvent the wheel, specifically the concept of money itself. But you ignore the physics of the market. You think you're smarter than centuries of financial history.
So here is the mission for this deep dive. We're going to peel back all the layers of the Terra ecosystem. We're going to move past the headlines of crypto crash and actually understand the mechanics. I want to know exactly how this algorithmic stablecoin worked, why it failed, and why smart people, and I mean really smart institutional investors, poured hundreds of millions of dollars into it.
And we have to talk about the human element. You can't separate the tech from the people.
Oh.
Do Kwon and Daniel Shin, the architects.
Absolutely.
Huh.
The charismatic, trash-talking leader and the quiet, connected operator. We're going to track them from the boardrooms of Seoul to a private jet on a runaway in Montenegro. But before we get to the handcuffs and the prison sentences, we have to start with the dream. Because in 2018, this didn't look like a scam. To a lot of people, it looked like the future.
It really did. You have to remember the context of 2018. Crypto was still trying to find its killer app. Bitcoin was great as digital gold, but it was too slow and way too volatile for, buying a coffee.
Right. You don't want your latte to cost $5 one day and $7 the next.
Exactly. And Ethereum was building this amazing world computer, but the transaction fees, the gas, was getting really expensive. The space was desperate for something that could be used for payments, something fast, cheap, and stable.
Enter Terraform Labs, founded in Seoul, South Korea.
Right. And as you said, it's founded by Do Kwon and Daniel Shin. And this is a key point. These weren't two kids hacking away in a basement.
No.
Daniel Shin was already a major tech mogul in Korea. He founded a company called Ticket Monster, which is a huge e-commerce platform there, a unicorn. He brought the business legitimacy, the connections.
And Do Kwon.
Do Kwon was the young visionary, the Stanford computer science grad, former engineer at Apple and Microsoft. He had the technical swagger, the belief that he could code a better form of money.
And they had the backing to match. I was looking at the investor list in the notes, and it is just staggering. It's a who's who of crypto venture capital. We're talking Coinbase Ventures, Galaxy Digital, Lightspeed Venture Partners, Arrington Capital.
These are the blue bloods. They raised $200 million across various rounds. And that's crucial to understand. When you see names like that on the cap table, it turns off your skepticism alarm.
Oh, absolutely. You assume that these multi-billion-dollar funds have done the due diligence. You assume they've hired PhDs to look at the map, and they've all said, yes, this works.
It's social proof on an institutional scale.
So what was the pitch? What was this revolutionary idea they were building that got everyone so excited?
At its core, they were building a decentralized economy. And the foundation of any economy is its currency. The core idea was that for crypto to be useful for daily life, you needed a currency that didn't fluctuate wildly. If I pay you for a service in Bitcoin today, and tomorrow Bitcoin drops 20%, I've essentially overpaid or you've lost a huge chunk of value. Commerce needs stability.
Okay, so they needed a stablecoin. Now, usually when I think of a stablecoin, I think of something like USDC or, back in the day, Tether.
Right. And the model for those is simple. I like to call it the vending machine model. You put a real US dollar into the machine, which is a bank account audited by a firm, and the machine spits out one digital dollar token.
One for one.
One for one. If you want your real dollar back, you put the digital dollar back in the machine. It's backed, or at least it claims to be, by real cash and U.S. treasuries.
But Terra didn't want to do that.
No, to them, that's centralized. That requires trusting a company, Circle or Tether, to actually hold the dollars. It requires trusting the traditional banking system. Terra wanted to be purely decentralized. They wanted money made from thin air, essentially, but backed by math and economic incentives rather than a vault full of cash.
Okay, this is where we need to get into the weeds.
Yeah.
Because this is the heart of the whole thing, the algorithmic stablecoin, the burn and mint equilibrium. Every time I try to explain this to friends, my eyes glaze over halfway through. Help us visualize this.
Okay, let's strip away all the code and the jargon. Let's use an analogy. Imagine a teeter-totter on a playground. A seesaw.
I'm with you. A teeter-totter.
On the left seat of the teeter-totter sits the stablecoin, TerraUSD or UST. Its job is to stay perfectly level, to hover exactly at the height of $1. It should never go up, never go down. It's the boring, stable side.
Okay, UST is on the left.
On the right seat sits the variable token, LNA. LNA is the shock absorber. It's allowed to go up and down like crazy. It's designed to be volatile.
So LNA takes all the volatility so the UST doesn't have to?
Exactly. Now, how do they stay balanced? How do they talk to each other? They are connected by a special rule, a mechanism in the code that allows you, the trader, to always swap one for the other at a fixed value of $1.
Always. Even if the price on an exchange like Binance is totally different.
That is the absolute key. This protocol, the core code, always values one UST at exactly $1. It doesn't care what the open market says. It's a hard-coded assumption. So let's play on a scenario. Let's say there's huge demand for UST. Everyone wants it, maybe to put it into a savings protocol we'll talk about later. The price on the open market shoots up to, say, $1.01.
Okay, so it's trading at a premium. UST is worth $1.01.
Right. Now you, the savvy arbitrage trader, see a free money opportunity. You can go to the protocol with $1 worth of Luna. Let's say Luna is worth $100 a token. You take 11/100th of your Luna token, you give it to the protocol, and you say, burn this.
Burn it? You mean delete it?
Precisely. You send it to a wallet no one can access. It's gone forever. And in exchange for burning that $1 worth of Luna, the protocol mints. It creates out of thin air one brand new UST token for you.
Okay, so I burn my Luna, I get one UST.
Which you can immediately go and sell on the open market for $1.01. You just made a penny of profit, almost completely risk-free.
A penny doesn't sound like much.
It isn't. But do it with $100 million. Have a computer do it 1,000 times a second. That is arbitrage. And now think about the effect of what you just did. You created more UST, you minted it, which increases the total supply. And what happens in economics when supply goes up?
Price comes down.
Price comes down. So the army of arbitrageurs, all chasing these tiny profits, naturally push the price of UST back down to $1. The system self-corrects.
Okay, that makes a weird kind of sense. High demand leads to more supply, price stabilizes. What about the other direction? This seems like the important one. What if people panic and sell UST, and the price on the open market drops to 99 cents?
This is the dangerous side of the teeter-totter.
Yeah.
This is where the whole thing can break. So if UST is trading on the open market at 99 cents, the arbitrage opportunity is reversed.
Okay.
You can go into the market, buy a UST for just 99 cents. Then you take that UST to the protocol and say, I want to swap this. The protocol, remember, is hard-coded. It says, sure, I value this UST at $1. So you burn the UST, and the protocol mints you $1 worth of brand new Luna.
So I spent 99 cents, and I get $1 worth of Luna. I can immediately sell that Luna on the market, and I've made a penny.
Exactly. And in doing so, you burned the UST. You took it out of circulation, you decreased the supply. Lower supply means the price should go up. In theory, back to $1.
So the whole system relies on these greedy traders acting in their own self-interest. They aren't trying to save the protocol. They're just trying to make a quick buck. And in the process, they keep the peg stable.
In theory, yes. When you draw it on a whiteboard, it's an elegant piece of game theory. It's beautiful, even. But there is a huge, massive hidden assumption here, a fatal flaw that everyone chose to ignore.
Which is?
The system assumes that LNA always has value. And not just some value, but enough market capitalization to absorb all the UST that might want to exit.
Because you're paying for the UST with newly minted LNA.
Right. Remember, when you are saving the peg in that downward scenario, you are minting LNA. You're creating more of it. If you mint more LNA, the supply of LNA goes up.
Which usually means the price of LNA goes down. Supply and demand.
Right. So you are essentially printing your own company's stock to buy back your own company's bet. If LMA is valuable, if it has a market cap of $40 billion like it did at its peak, it can easily absorb a few $100 million of shock. The price might dip a little, but it holds. But what if LNA's price starts crashing at the same time? What if people lose faith in the shock absorber itself?
Then you're in deep, deep trouble. Because to get that same $1 of value to bail out one UST, you have to mint more and more and more LNA as its price falls.
Precisely. It's a reflexive loop, and we will see exactly how that math plays out in the crash section. But for a few years, nobody looked at the downside. They only saw the upside. Because the ecosystem wasn't just tokens, it was exploding with applications.
Right. They were building that whole city on the blockchain you mentioned.
They were really good at building an ecosystem to create demand for UST. They had the mirror protocol, which was kind of brilliant and also, wildly illegal.
What did it do?
It allowed people to trade synthetic stocks. You could deposit UST, and in return, you'd get a token that tracked the price of, say, Tesla stock or Apple stock.
So you could get exposure to the U.S. stock market without ever leaving the crypto world.
Exactly.
Right.
The SEC hated it, obviously, because it bypassed all securities laws. But for users in countries without easy access to U.S. markets, it was a killer app. And then there was Chai.
This was the thing that always gave Terra so much credibility. I remember reading all these articles saying, Terra is the only crypto actually being used for real payments by real people.
That was the narrative. Daniel Shin's app, Chai, was a popular payment service in South Korea, and they claimed to be processing millions of transactions on the back end using the Terra blockchain. The story was, look, Grandma in Seoul is buying groceries with crypto, and she doesn't even know it.
It provided this shield of real-world utility. It made it seem less like a financial game and more like real technology adoption.
It was the perfect story. But as we'd later find out during the investigations by Korean prosecutors, much of that claimed volume was, let's say, questionable. The connection to the blockchain wasn't as deep or as real as they claimed.
We'll get to the fraud allegations.
Yeah.
But before we do, we have to talk about the hook, the thing that really poured gasoline on this fire. Because a clever algorithm is nice, but it doesn't get you to a $40 billion market cap on its own. You need something more primal. You need greed. You need the Anchor protocol.
Anchor was the black hole that sucked in all the liquidity in the crypto market. It was, on the surface, a lending and borrowing protocol launched in March 2021, but really it only had one feature that mattered.
The savings account. And I use air quotes because, well, tell us the number.
19.45% APY. Let's call it 20%.
20% interest.
And this wasn't a fluctuating rate, not initially. It was marketed as a stable, predictable 20%. Now, let's contextualize this for a second. In 2021, the Federal Reserve interest rate was near zero.
I remember my savings account at Wells Fargo was paying, I think, 0.01%.
Right. You were actively losing money to inflation by keeping it in a bank. And here comes Do Kwon and Terra saying, give me your dollars, convert them to our stablecoin UST, park them in this protocol called Anchor, and we will pay you 20% a year.
It was irresistible.
It was the best marketing tool ever invented. And it wasn't just for crypto bros. We are talking about regular people. We are talking about fintech startups that built their entire business model on the back end of Anchor. They take customer deposits, promise them 8% yield, put it all in Anchor to get 20%, and pocket the difference.
So people were using this who didn't even know what a blockchain was. They just thought they found a high-yield savings account.
A huge number. At its peak, Anchor had something like $17 billion in deposits. Most of the entire supply of UST was locked up in Anchor.
But hold on. It's a fundamental question. How do you generate 20% risk-free? If I walk into a bank and ask for a loan, they charge me maybe 5% or 6% interest. If Anchor's paying depositors 20%, they must be charging borrowers
But
25%, 30%. Who's borrowing money at 30%?
nobody. That was the problem. The borrowing demand on Anchor was nowhere near high enough to pay the depositors. The protocol was earning maybe 5–6% from lending and staking rewards, but it was paying out 20%. The math just didn't add up.
So where was the extra 14–15% coming from?
It was subsidized. It was coming directly from Terraform Labs and later the Luna Foundation Guard. They created something called the Yield Reserve, and they just dumped hundreds of millions of their own dollars into it.
So it was a marketing budget.
It was purely a customer acquisition cost. They were burning their own cash to pay out that 20% just to get people to buy and hold UST. The goal was to get UST so big, so integrated into the crypto economy that it would become too big to fail.
So they were literally paying people to use their money.
Yes, and critics saw this. There were voices, loud voices on Twitter and in crypto media saying this is a Ponzi structure. They laid it out perfectly. If the only way you can pay the yield to existing investors is by bringing in new money or by running your own reserves, that is the definition of an unsustainable system. Eventually, the reserves run dry.
And how did Do Kwon respond to these critics? Because this is where his personality becomes a major part of the story.
Do Kwon was aggressive. That's the polite word. He was a prolific tweeter. His handle, ironically, was @stablecoin. And whenever anyone with a serious following questioned the mechanics, whenever anyone asked, hey, what happens when the yield reserve runs out, he would mock them. He would belittle them.
He had that famous line,
I don't debate the poor on Twitter.
I don't debate the poor. Just imagine the CEO of a major financial institution saying that. Jamie Dimon or something. It's unthinkable.
It is. But in the bubble of crypto in 2021, it worked. It created a cult of personality. If you held O&A, you were a lunatic. That was the actual name for the community. And they viewed Do Kwon as this genius god king who had figured out how to solve money. Any criticism was just FUD, fear, uncertainty, and doubt. It was dismissed as noise from people who were just salty. They missed the boat.
And the hubris wasn't just on Twitter. It spilled out into the real world. I mean, the Washington Nationals deal.
Oh, that was peak bubble behavior. This was February 2022. We are now just 3 months before everything collapsed. Terraform Labs signs a massive sponsorship deal with the MLB team, the Washington Nationals.
For how much?
$38.15 million.
Wow.
A 5-year deal. They rebranded the premium lounge right behind home plate as the Terra Club. There were ads for UST in a baseball stadium. They were trying to market an algorithmic stablecoin to mainstream sports fans.
And the way that deal happened is wild, too. Kwon proposed it to the community for a governance vote, right?
Yes, that was the veneer of decentralization. But he didn't even say which team it was. The proposal just said something like a sponsorship opportunity with a sports franchise in one of the 4 major American leagues. He basically said, trust me, it's good marketing, give me the money. And the community, the lunatics, blindly voted yes. They authorized spending $38 million of the community treasury on a mystery box.
That is the definition of too much money, too little diligence.
Mm-hmm.
But even as they were buying baseball lounges, behind the scenes, the cracks were starting to show. They knew the algorithm wasn't bulletproof.
They did. In January 2022, you start to see a subtle pivot in their strategy. They realized that if a massive panic happened, a true bank run, the mint and burn mechanism might not be fast enough or strong enough. Luna's price might crash too hard, too fast. So they created a new entity, the Luna Foundation Guard, or LFG.
A nonprofit based in Singapore.
Correct. And the stated goal of the LFG was to build a war chest, a reserve of assets that were not Lunane or UST. They wanted hard collateral, exogenous collateral, so they started buying Bitcoin.
Aggressively.
Very aggressively. Karan went on podcasts and said his goal was to become the largest single holder of Bitcoin in the world, second only to Satoshi Nakamoto. By early May 2022, just before the crash, they had accumulated over 80,000 Bitcoin.
Which was worth how much at the time?
About $2.4 billion.
And the plan was, if the peg breaks, if our algorithm fails, we'll sell all this Bitcoin to buy UST off the market and prop up the price.
Exactly. It was a backstop. It was an emergency fund. But think about the irony of that. They spent years saying, our algorithm is superior. We don't need collateral like those other guys. And then right at the end, they panicked and bought $2.5 billion worth of collateral.
It's like a tightrope walker who spends the whole show bragging about how he doesn't need a net, and then 5 minutes before the grand finale, he quietly asks his assistant to go and put a mattress down below.
A mattress that turned out to be the size of a postage stamp compared to the height of the fall.
So let's move to May 2022, the collapse.
Mm-hmm.
Because this wasn't a slow decline, this was a free fall.
It was a cliff, and we can pretty much trace the trigger event. It started over the weekend of May 7th and 8th. The broader crypto market was already jittery, the Fed was raising interest rates, things were looking shaky. But then a series of massive sell orders hit the main UST liquidity pools on an exchange called Curve.
Curve is a decentralized exchange where people mostly swap stablecoins with each other.
Exactly. It's the main plumbing for stablecoin trading in DeFi. Someone, And we still debate exactly who, though later evidence points towards some large trading firms unwinding their positions, started dumping hundreds of millions of dollars of UST onto the market in a very short period.
So suddenly there's way more UST being sold than being bought.
And the peg slipped. It wasn't a catastrophe at first. It went to 99 cents, then 98 cents. Now, remember the arbitrage mechanism we talked about?
Right, the traders should step in, buy the cheap UST at 98 cents, burn it with the protocol for $1 worth of LNA, and make a profit.
And they tried. For a little while they did. But the selling pressure was just too high. It was a tidal wave. There was too much UST flooding the exit all at once. The arbitrageurs couldn't keep up. And this is where the death spiral mechanics took over.
Walk us through the math of the spiral. Why did it get so bad so fast?
Okay, so to save the peg, the protocol has to mint a LUNA. If I come with one UST that's worth, say, 90 cents on the market, the protocol still owes me $1 worth of LUNA. When LUNA is trading at $80 a token, which it was right before the crash, the protocol only needs to mint a tiny fraction of a LUNA token 1/80th to pay me my dollar.
Right, it's a small amount of new supply. The dilution is minimal.
But as the panic set in and the peg broke more severely, people started selling LUNA too. They saw the system was failing, they got scared, they dumped their LUNA. So the price of LUNA dropped from $80 to, say, $40.
Okay, so now to pay me my $1, the protocol has to mint twice as much LUNA as before.
Exactly. And that new LUNA hits the open market, further diluting the supply, which pushes the price down even more to $20. Now you have to mint 4 times as much LUNA to cover that same $1 of UST debt. Then LUNA hits $1. Now you are minting 1 full LUNA token for every single UST being redeemed.
And then LUNA hits 10 cents.
Now you are minting 10 LUNAs for every UST. Do you see the exponential curve? As the price of LUNA approaches 0, the amount of new LUNA you have to mint to cover the debt approaches infinity.
It's hyperinflation on steroids. A feedback loop from hell.
It was terrifying to watch in real time. The supply of LUNA went from about 350 million tokens in circulation to, get this, 6.5 trillion tokens in the span of a few days. The algorithm was just mindlessly printing LUNA to try and cover the debt, but the debt was toxic and the currency it was printing was becoming worthless.
So what was the Luna Foundation Guard doing with that $2.4 billion of Bitcoin, the emergency fund?
They deployed it. On May 9th and 10th, they completely emptied the vaults. They sent the Bitcoin to exchanges like Binance and Gemini and started market selling it to buy UST.
Did it work? Did it stabilize the price?
For a few hours, it created a bounce. The peg went from a low of around 60 cents back up towards 90 cents. There was a moment of hope. But the market simply absorbed all that capital and kept selling. $2.5 billion just vanished. It was like trying to fill the Grand Canyon with a garden hose. And worse, by dumping all that Bitcoin so quickly, they crashed the price of Bitcoin too. So the entire crypto market tanked along with them.
I remember looking at Twitter and Reddit during those days. It was pure panic. There were suicide hotlines being pinned to the top of the Terra subreddits by the moderators.
It was horrific. You had people who had put their life savings into Anchor because they were told it was a stable savings account. They didn't think they were gambling on some altcoin. There were people in their 60s who put their retirement in. They woke up and saw their $500,000 portfolio was now worth $500. It was life-altering destruction.
And the response from Do Kwon and the team?
It was chaos. Do Kwon was tweeting things like, deploying more capital steady lads. But on May 13th, 2022, they had to do the unthinkable. The validators of the network agreed to halt the blockchain.
They turned it off.
They turned it off. A decentralized currency turned off like a light switch. They had to, because with the price of LNA so low and the supply so high, governance attacks were becoming possible. Someone could buy up a majority of the tokens for pennies and take over the network. It was the official moment of death.
So the dust settles. $45 billion is gone. UST is trading at a few cents. LNA is effectively zero. What happens next? Where do you even begin to pick up the pieces?
Well, first comes the confusion and the anger. Then comes the rebranding attempt. About 2 weeks later, on May 25th, Terraform Labs and Do Kwon push a plan to fork the chain.
Meaning they split the software into 2 different versions.
Yes. They basically said, okay, that old chain with the algorithmic stablecoin, that's broken, it's a failure, we're going to leave it behind. We'll rename it Terra Classic, and its token will be LUNC.
LUNC, got it.
And we are going to launch a brand new chain, a fresh start, called Terra 2.0, and the new token on that chain would take the original LUNA ticker. But crucially, the new chain didn't have the stablecoin. They completely abandoned the UST concept.
So it was a tacit admission that their core product, their whole grand experiment, was fundamentally flawed.
It was a complete admission of failure. They airdropped the new LNA tokens to holders of the old LUNC and UST to try and make them whole, but it was pennies on the dollar.
And did the market forgive them? Did Terra 2.0 succeed?
Not really. The new LNA token launched, spiked for a day as people sold the airdrop, and then crashed again. Trust is a very hard thing to rebuild when you've just incinerated the entire GDP of a small country.
But while the investors were licking their wounds, the founders were making exit plans. This brings us to the manhunt, because this story turns from a financial disaster into a crime thriller very, very quickly.
It does, and the authorities were looking at both founders. Let's start with Daniel Shin. He tried to play the I wasn't involved card. He put out statements saying he had stepped away from Terraform Labs years prior to focus on Chai.
But the prosecutors in South Korea didn't buy that.
Not for a second. They found regulatory filings that showed he still held significant ownership in Terraform Labs right up until the end, and they raided the offices of Chai. They alleged that Chai wasn't actually using the blockchain for payments in the way they claimed. They were just mirroring data onto the chain after the fact to create the illusion of volume. It was alleged fraud on top of the catastrophic failure. He was eventually indicted in South Korea.
And then there's the main character, Do Kwon.
The captain of the ship. Just days before the crash, April 30th, 2022, to be exact, Do Kwon filed paperwork in South Korea to dissolve the Korean entity of Terraform Labs.
Wait, say that again? April 30th. That's barely a week before the depegging started.
The timing is, to put it mildly, incredibly suspicious. It strongly suggests he knew a collapse was imminent, or at least highly likely. He had already moved his family to Singapore. And then, as the investigations heated up in late 2022, he went dark. He vanished.
But not completely silent. He did that bizarre interview.
The coinage interview in August 2022, it was surreal. He's on camera, looking relaxed in a t-shirt, maybe a little humbled, but still with that undercurrent of arrogance. He admitted his faith in the project was super irrational, but he flatly denied it was a Ponzi scheme. He tried to frame himself as a failed inventor, not a fraudster.
While he was a fugitive.
While he was an international fugitive, Interpol issued a red notice for his arrest. South Korea revoked his passport. He was technically an undocumented person moving between countries.
And he was on the run for months.
Months. There were rumors he was in Dubai, Russia, Serbia, of all places. It turns out he was in Serbia for a while. But in March of 2023, the net finally closed in.
Podgorica Airport, Montenegro.
This is straight out of a Bourne movie. A private jet is waiting on the tarmac, ready to fly to Dubai. Do Kwon and his CFO, Han Chang-jun, walk up to the passport control desk.
And what documents do they hand the border control officer?
Costa Rican passports.
Fake ones.
High-quality forgeries, but fake nonetheless. The border guard gets suspicious, runs the numbers, and it comes back as fraudulent. They search their luggage, they find another set of passports, Belgian ones, also fake, and a stash of electronics.
Why do you need two sets of fake passports from different countries if you're just an innocent startup founder whose project failed?
You don't. That was the smoking gun that proved intent to flee, not just travel. They were arrested on the spot.
Yeah.
And that kicked off this massive diplomatic tug of war. The U.S. wanted to extradite him for securities fraud. South Korea wanted him for financial crimes. Montenegro had him for the fake documents.
He's got a good amount of time in a Montenegrin prison while they fought over who got to prosecute him first.
Which I hear is not quite the same level of luxury as the Terra Club Lounge at the baseball stadium.
Definitely not. And finally, looking back from our perch here in 2026, we have the resolution to that legal battle.
We do. Terraform Labs itself filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy in January 2024, but the real hammer fell on Do Kwon personally.
He was eventually extradited to the U.S., and the trial.
Well, it never got to a full trial. He took a plea deal. In August 2025, Do Kwon pleaded guilty to 2 counts of fraud.
And the sentence.
On December 11, 2025, he was sentenced to 15 years in federal prison. He also had to forfeit $19 million of personal assets, and the company had billions in civil judgments against it that, of course, it could never pay.
15 years. It's a long time, but for $45 billion in damage. I'm sure there are victims who feel that's light.
The U.S. prosecutors argued for more, but the judge weighed the plea deal. Still, it sends a clear message. You can't just code your way out of securities fraud. Eventually, the law catches up.
We can't wrap this up without talking about the enablers, because Do Kwon didn't do this alone. He had help, whether witting or unwitting, from some of the biggest players in the industry.
This is the part of the story that makes the big institutional players squirm. Let's talk about jump trading.
Jump is a massive, secretive, high-frequency trading firm. They're like the plumbing of both the stock market and the crypto market.
In October 2024, the SEC reached a settlement with Jump Trading for $123 million. And the details that came out of that settlement were damning for the Terra narrative.
What did they do?
The SEC alleged that way back in May of 2021, a full year before the final collapse UST had depegged before, it dropped to something like 94 cents. The algorithm failed then.
Wait, so the death spiral almost happened a year earlier?
It almost did. But nobody knew because, according to the SEC, Jump Trading secretly stepped in.
Oh.
They made a deal with Do Kwon. Jump would buy massive amounts of UST on the open market to prop up the price. They artificially restored the peg.
So they painted the tape. They created the illusion that the algorithm worked and had self-corrected, when in reality it was just a secret, centralized bailout.
Exactly. And in exchange, Terraform Labs gave Jump sweetheart deals on LNA tokens at a huge discount, allowing them to make over $1 billion. It was a symbiotic relationship built on deception. If investors had known in 2021 that the algorithm had already failed once, do you think they would have poured billions more into Anchor in 2022?
No way. That's a material fact that was hidden from the market. And what about Binance?
The 800-pound gorilla of crypto exchanges. They were an early investor in Terraform Labs. They listed UST and LNA. They promoted Anchor Protocol's 20% yield on our platform, calling it safe and stable.
Which it wasn't.
Which it was not. There have been numerous class action lawsuits in the U.S. and formal complaints in countries like France accusing Binance of misleading advertising. It reinforces the idea that the exchanges weren't neutral platforms. They were active participants, profiting from the trading volume, even as the ship was clearly taking on water.
So we have the crash, the manhunt, the prison sentence, and the regulatory crackdown. I remember South Korea revived its Special Financial Crimes Unit, the Grim Reaper of UEDO, just for this case.
That name is so metal. But yes, the regulatory landscape we live in today in 2026 is strictly defined by the Terra collapse. Algorithmic stablecoins are effectively banned or regulated out of existence in most major jurisdictions now.
So let's land this plane. We've been through the mechanics, the madness, and the aftermath. What is the takeaway? Why does this story matter to the listener who might just have a 401k and has never touched crypto?
I think there are two massive, enduring lessons here. The first is what I call the innovation trap.
Explain that.
We live in a world, especially in tech and finance, that fetishizes complexity. If someone explains an investment to you and uses a bunch of jargon words like burn and mint equilibrium or algorithmic peg or synthetic derivatives flywheel, your brain tends to shut off and you assume, wow, they must be smarter than me. This must be legitimate.
It uses complexity to mask a lack of fundamental value.
Exactly. Innovation is great, but financial gravity is a real undefeated force. If an investment claims to be stable but isn't backed by anything other than faith in its own future growth and a complex algorithm, it's not an investment. It's a confidence game.
And the second lesson?
The yield warning. This is the one I want everyone listening to burn into their brain.
Yeah.
20%.
The golden number.
If someone, anyone, anywhere offers you 20% interest when the risk-free rate, what you can get from the government, is 1% or 2% or even 5%, you need to run in the other direction. There is no such thing as a risk-free 20% return. It does not exist. The risk is just hidden.
And if you don't know where the yield is coming from?
You are the yield. Your new investment money is being used to pay the interest to the people who got in before you.
You are the yield. That's a chilling thought.
It's the simple truth. The people who made money on Terra were the early investors and the ones who got out before the music stopped. The people who provided the exit liquidity were the regular folks who came in at the end, chasing that impossible 20% promise.
It's a hard lesson, but at a very, very high price.
A $45 billion price? And 15 years of Do Kwon's life.
So here's the final thought I want to leave you with. With Do Kwon in prison, with the enablers having paid their fines, and with Terra Classic still, bizarrely, trading is a kind of zombie meme coin. Have we actually fixed the structural issues in finance that allowed this to happen? Or are we just waiting for the next charismatic founder with a complex revolutionary algorithm to repeat the whole cycle all over again?
That is the question, isn't it?
It is. Thank you for taking us through the math and the madness of this story.
It was a pleasure.
And to you, the listener, stay curious but stay skeptical, especially if someone offers you 20% interest. We'll see you on the next deep dive.